DD India's Jessica Taneja joins us live from Moscow. Jessica has covered the entire Prime Minister's visit to Russia, and I also take this opportunity to welcome Ambassador Anil Kumar Trignath, former senior diplomat. Thank you very much. Namaste, sir. Let's quickly go to Jessica first to sum up the visit. Jessica, how do you really look at it? From receiving the highest civilian honor in Russia to conversations revolving around fuel, fertilizer, terrorism, cooperation in economic sphere, defense, etc. And then also taking putting all speculations to rest and taking Russia-Ukraine conflict discussion head on with the Russian president. What do you think has been one of the highest points of this visit, or many high points rather?
Well, you're correct in pointing out there were many high points, including the ones that you mentioned, specifically talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict that has been watched globally. And yesterday you saw what happened in Ukraine. So, of course, the Prime Minister also did not mince his words in saying that India does not want this prolonged war or conflict to continue and would hope for any peaceful resolution. That includes dialogue and diplomacy, and particularly the Prime Minister's words stressing the fact that solutions cannot be found on the battlefield. Now, this is the official line that the Indian ministry and the Indian officials have taken so far. Pardon me for that disruption there, Sakal. The wind is sort of not playing the wind is sort of creating a problem here. But at this point, continue and go back to where I was. Is the fact that the Russia-Ukraine conflict was the center of discussion, not just today, but even yesterday at the dinner, which Prime Minister had with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So the stress on the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been quite a bit. India has said that it is open to exploring ideas on where peace and stability can be brought about, because the kind of impact that this war has created, especially the economic impact across the world, certainly calls a pause in what we see in the neighborhood right here on the streets of Moscow. Well, the picture is slightly different, but you know, geopolitics is playing out very differently at this time.
Yes, geopolitics playing out differently at this time. Jessica, let's take this thought to Ambassador Trignath here. Sir, what are your thoughts? We'd like to know. And also, Jessica spoke about impact. So how do you see this panning out from here? The impact of Russian president and India's Prime Minister in single frame. This visit has been keenly watched by the rest of the world, particularly Western media. How do you look at the overall deliverables and how India has made its intent once again clear that we believe in multipolarity, but we follow our foreign policy independently?
Well, you are absolutely right. And in fact, this visit, if you come to think of it, is marked by symbolism, a huge substance, and reiterating the special status and the overall strength of the bilateral relationship that is there. That means you are trusted, you have a strategic partnership during which you can talk to each other freely, openly, and clearly. And so there was a free, frank discussion. As far as the Russia-Ukraine war, India reiterated its position, which has been there. Prime Minister Modi, as you know, was at the G7 and had met President Zelensky and several other world leaders. And at the same time, now here in Russia, he has been continuing with what he started from day one when the war started, that peace is the only way out. He has said that bombs and guns don't solve any problems. So therefore, the battlefield does not solve the problem. It has to be on the table, and that's what he has tried to assess probably and very clearly mentioned it too. So therefore, one thing I would like to tell you that the reaction by President Zelensky was over the board and over the top and was not necessary. It was totally irresponsible, but he himself has been asking along with other leaders
would that be of any
India
consequence,
should play a bigger role. And this is a relationship of consequence. That's the important thing. And it is a very diversified relationship, and which is come to stay, which will continue to stay apace. I mean, you know, the trade target has been set to $100 billion. Today we have $65 billion. We were struggling at $10 billion earlier. In the defense, in the space, and civil nuclear cooperation, or for that matter in the Far East.
Yes.
All these are going to be eventually figuring into the agreements that are going to be signed. And so bilaterally, I think we are in a strong place. And Prime Minister Modi spoke about the 3 Fs, the fertilizer, fuel, and food. I mean, those are very important points because of which India has been continuing to import a lot of food from Russia.
Yes.
And that has ballooned it. Now, that will also provide a strategic opportunity to Russia to invest in India's critical sectors, including in the defense, in the Make in India and others.
Yes, defense and trade and expanding the trade basket, the nitty-gritties of bilateral, Jessica, would you like to add more to that?
Well, as Ambassador Tribhuwan has pointed out, talking about the 3 Fs, that has been the focus of this visit as well, and talking about looking at bilateral trade to reach at $100 billion by 2030 is a target set where you could see diversification and co-production of technology as well in many fields. And if you go through with the joint statement and you see the kind of diversification that India is looking at, particularly with Russia, would go beyond energy trade, while energy isn't crucial because it drives the economic engine of the country. Of course, India has been the recipient of discounted Russian crude for the last 3 years, and that has also led to a trade imbalance between the two, which is $65 billion, out of which $60 billion is only oil trade. So, of course, India has taken those issues into consideration, and also ironing out the rupee-ruble system and making sure that the banking systems and the mechanisms are in place to ensure smooth facilitation of businesses on both ends, and that perhaps would reinvigorate the relationship that both the leaders have envisioned. And as a matter of fact, if the world watches closely as to how India navigates this relationship in a world of multipolarity, this is certainly a vision which is shared by Russia as well. And both India and Russia, beyond multipolarity, also look at the world as in a very polycentric view. And of course, making sure that Russia, for India, it is a priority to make sure that Russia doesn't become a vassal to China, because currently that has been a concern on the Indian side. But again, all initiatives in hand, India will make whatever effort it can to ensure that Russia is not reduced to as a junior partner to China, and India continues to offer that crucial support to Russia, which holds considerable influence in the continental neighborhood that we're surrounded with, because Russia, security, peace and stability in the region is more important for the Asian security as well.
Right. Your thoughts on this, Ambassador, ensuring that Russia is not further isolated or alienated, but yet at the same time putting all the speculations to rest. Indian Prime Minister did take up Russia-Ukraine not once, multiple times, as pointed out by our correspondent in Moscow, tracking it closely. That there was a strong message out there.
Well, India has been, if you come to think of it, from the day one of the war, has been propagating that dialogue, diplomacy, peace and respect for the UN Charter are very important. And that's precisely what Prime Minister Modi has said. And after his visit in the G7, I mean, there is a direct connect with this now. Here also, again, he's telling President Putin, which he had told earlier in Samarkand, this is not an era of war. He's telling them that we should work for peace. And President Putin apparently must have given him his contours of what kind of peace he wants and what kind of role India can play. So India can be an honest interlocutor in this. As far as China question is concerned, I fully agree with Jessica. The thing is that due to because Russia looks at this war not as a war between Russia and Ukraine, it is a war between Russia and the West, especially the United States. And therefore, China has been, due to this particular compulsion, they need China to counter the West. And that's why their closer relationship that is being seen. But that is not at the expense of India. And likewise, India is an important partner for Russia in order to counter the Chinese hegemony in the Russian geostrategic space.
As a potent force, Ambassador, from here on, would you say that this relationship has moved multifold, the way it's panned out, considering what is happening in the war theatre? How do you look at this relationship consolidating further at this point where we're looking at a divided world?
Well, the world will remain divided. I mean, and I personally feel that we are heading towards a Cold War 2.0 kind of a scenario. Many people may disagree with that. and India will be another pole. And Prime Minister actually mentioned it briefly in the multipolarity that India would also be a pole. So I think that will continue to happen there. But India has played that role earlier, and India will be able to play that role with the strategic autonomy. That is very much part of it.
Yeah.
But relationship bilaterally, I think that this is one of the most expensive relationships.
Okay.
So wide and with a very gamut of everything that could think of: defense, security, space, civil nuclear cooperation, counterterrorism, and everything. Whatever under the sun comes under this. Now there are the new areas of cooperation that is in the Arctic, in the connectivity corridors like Chennai and Vladivostok corridor, or for that matter, North-South transport corridor, which needs to pick up. And also in the Eurasian space, there is a greater cooperation that is taking place. So I see that the relationship is going to become far more deepened and far more substantive over time to come.
Okay. Jessica, would you like to come in here? And also from you, would like to know, this meant a lot for Kremlin. You know, the rare gesture where you have the Deputy Prime Minister receiving the red carpet being rolled out, you know, and of course, the highest Russian civilian honor. We were talking to one of our guests from Moscow saying that Modi, quote unquote, is a big deal in Russia. So this has been really, really keenly followed by not only Russian media, but world media. But I just want to know from you, how has Russian media picked this up and how significantly they look at it?
Well, the Russian media has played it to the optics that one had already anticipated, is to also show that President Putin is not isolated, and it continues to engage with a major power like India as well in its neighborhood, given the fact that we also face a significant threat from China at this point, but also signaling that it will not be reduced to a junior partner.
Okay, we'll try and get back to
trajectory with India as well.
Okay, Jessica, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I will repeat that. Well, the Russian media has been able to play this in a sense that would work perfectly for the optics of Russian President Vladimir Putin, is also showing, as a matter of fact, that he is not isolated or alienated. And this visit sort of cements and reaffirms that. And of course, having an important partner like India, which has had, which of course has practices strategic autonomy, as Ambassador Vivian also pointed out. Interestingly, this works well for Vladimir Putin back home as well. So you see the previous visits of Vladimir Putin, one to China, then to North Korea, and surprisingly to Vietnam as well, showing that there is a certain influence that the Russian president still holds. We're talking about Vladimir Putin, who was the deputy prime minister in the 1990s, then in 2001 when he became the president, until we're talking now 2024. So, this does send a good message back home for the Russian president as well, and showing that despite the Western sanctions, despite the alienation and isolation, in fact, Russia, as you know, is the most sanctioned country in the world, along with North Korea. So, so this does send a message to his people as well, that he still continues to hold that considerable sway in geopolitics and still a leader for them, who would be able to find the right course.
Yeah.
But only time will tell as to how things really work out, because everyone at this point is calling for a moment to pause those activities in Ukraine. The one we saw yesterday was condemned even by our Prime Minister.
Absolutely. And that pause is something which is not happening. I mean, Ambassador Trignot, your thoughts? There were very strong comments, interesting comments rather, in that event. The community outreach event by the Prime Minister himself was very engaging. And when Prime Minister said, besides other things, that when India speaks diplomatically, the world takes a note, the world listens. So for Kremlin, I mean, Kremlin needs New Delhi more than, I mean, how do you look at the balance here?
I think we both need each other. It is
but who
not
needs,
something
who needs the other person more? That's the question.
Well, in that sense, I think India is in a better placed situation, because we have equally good relations with the United States, with the West. And India is looking to be a bridge builder between the East and the West, and the North and the South. and also following our G20 principles and the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and all. So India is far more better placed in that situation. But one thing is there, we should also, what Jessica mentioned is right. But at the same time, today, Russia is the chair of the BRICS. And this year, you might see 30, 40 countries present there in the BRICS summit, meeting there, or the outreach summit, which will happen. So which will also indicate that Russia is not really isolated in that sense, and they have already completely decided to dissociate from the US dollar, and they are coming up with their own currency mechanisms and things like that. So we are looking at, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at a more divided world rather than a world that is willing to live in peace and happiness.
And India taking the lead position there as well, and not only as a leader of the global south. I'm sorry, I'll have to wrap it up here, Ambassador Trignon, but it's always such a pleasure talking to you, sir. And Jessica, Taneja, thank you very, very much for joining us live from Moscow and for all your reports. Thank you, both of you.